Okay, a ton has been made of a recent report that says, a $15 minimum wage would destroy more than 1 million jobs. And this report is being cited by right wingers all over the country as proof that a $15 minimum wage would be terrible for the country and we shouldn't do it. And in fact, this is being used to argue that we shouldn't even have a minimum wage at all because it's an artificial price floor and it's bad for the economy. So I want to actually talk this through with you today because you might be shocked to hear this, but the right-wing reaction to this study makes no sense at all and is patently dishonest. So let's start with what the study says. Right now, the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, which is insane. I often forget about this because I live in Massachusetts. But federally, even though many states have higher minimum wages, federally, the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. The study by the CBO looked at increases to $10 an hour, $12 an hour, and $15 an hour by 2025. We're just going to focus on the 15 an hour to keep it simple today. Increasing the minimum wage to $15 by 2025, the CBO study found, would increase the effective net wages of 17 million people who would otherwise be earning under $15 an hour. That's good news. In addition to raising the wages of 17 million who would be earning under $15 an hour, it would also push up slightly the wages of another 10 million people who are earning right around 15 or will be earning right around $15 an hour in 2025. So 27 million people in total will have higher wages as a result of this minimum wage increase. However, about 1.3 million people would be moved, would not have a job who otherwise would. People, it doesn't necessarily mean people will be fired, but it means that in 2025, with a $15 minimum wage, there are 1.3 million people who would otherwise have jobs who will not because of that minimum wage increase. And it would have a slightly inflationary effect on prices overall. So first of all, we have to understand that these numbers, the CBO admits, are uncertain because the CBO straight up admits we don't know how responsive unemployment or employment are to changes in the minimum wage. They admit there is a lot of uncertainty about how sensitive is employment relative to a change in the minimum wage. Is it extremely sensitive or is it only slightly sensitive? In addition, there are other studies published at the exact same time that say there would not be this effect of 1.3 million jobs that would not exist were it not for that $15 minimum wage. But for this discussion, let's imagine that these numbers are 100% accurate from the CBO. The question becomes, does it make sense to increase the minimum wage to $15 or not? So the most childish argument is any policy that leads to any job loss is a bad policy. Now, this is an outrageous position to take because almost any economic policy decision has some gains and some losses, and you basically can't do anything. I mean, the government would not be able to do any economic policy if the rule was if any jobs are lost, we don't do it. So that's not even a serious argument. It is true that to come in and in some states, you would be effectively more than doubling the minimum wage. That is going to affect employers more if the wage than if the wage had been increasing with inflation all along. And that's part of the problem here. We are so far behind on minimum wage increases in states that still have a minimum wage that is equal to the federal minimum wage of $7.25, that we now have a situation where going to $15 would more than double the minimum wage in some states. So this is how you have an adult conversation. There's a benefit to the policy, but it also comes with a cost. Is the cost too high? Is the cost acceptable? Is it low and we get a lot more benefit than we lose by putting in place this policy? When you look at where a $15 minimum wage would have the biggest impact, you immediately see that the gains will be in the places where people much more desperately need it in terms of wage growth. And the job losses will also be disproportionately in the places that are so far behind on the minimum wage right now that going to $15 would be effectively doubling the minimum wage in their state. So can I answer for you whether it makes sense in your state to have this trade-off? I can't really do that. Can I answer whether 27 million people getting a raise and pulling about 2 million people out of poverty, is that a valuable trade-off? Is it a fair trade-off for 1.3 million not having jobs in 2025 who otherwise would? No, I can't really tell you that. I mean, each of us has different priorities. What I can tell you definitively is that this exposes the bigger truth about the minimum wage, which I've been talking about for years now. The first bigger truth is that this is really an issue that probably has to vary state by state. And what I mean by that is that because the cost of living is so drastically different in different parts of the country, and even within states, like, for example, New York State, which has New York City, and extremely rural, low cost of living areas upstate, a living wage in some low cost of living states would be too low to even be a reasonable minimum wage in a place that has a high cost of living, like New York City or Boston, San Francisco, Los Angeles. So I question even handling this as a federal issue, even though a $7.25 federal minimum wage is outrageously low, and that needs to change. The second bigger truth here is that this once again gets to what I said to a caller last week when they said, does the $15 minimum wage or does universal basic income, does that really solve the problem that we are dealing with? And the answer is that these are not solutions to our broken economy, particularly with automation coming, 40 years of productivity gains going to the richest people while the bottom half have effectively stagnant wages, increased inequality. The solution is not going to be a $15 minimum wage. The solution is not going to be universal basic income. Now, that doesn't mean don't do them, okay? But what it does mean is that we need to all understand to really solve our problems, we've got to be thinking way bigger, and almost none of our politicians are. Now, Andrew Yang is actually talking about this. I just don't agree with all of his proposals. I think that the VAT tax proposal he has, that's a hugely regressive tax. I don't like that. I think that the implementation of some of his other ideas is the wrong one, but he is at least talking about it. Last thing, really important to understand on the back end that, again, the numbers we used for our discussion today might be totally wrong because there's a University of California study which says that a $15 minimum wage by 2024 simply would not cause the level of job losses that the CBO study claims. So there is a conflict there, but it doesn't matter because none of it solves the reality that we have a broken relationship between humans and work. This includes this average 40-hour, 5-day-a-week work week. This includes the connection between work and healthcare that we have. And it includes the fact that the economy values at zero a lot of work that has value, like raising kids, taking care of our elderly parents, volunteering in our communities. And whether the minimum wage is $10, $12, or $15, that is still going to be a problem. One of today's sponsors is Impeach the Card Slap Game. You can't slap Donald Trump in real life, but you can slap him in this really funny and intelligent 2-player card game. And you can get it for 10% off at davidpakman.com/impeach. Impeach the Card Game is perfect for having friends over, hanging out with family members who have a sense of humor about Trump. We've been playing it at my place. I really don't think you'd be able to find a game that does a better job of satirizing today's political climate in such an intelligent way. I've had a ton of fun with it. I think you will too. You can tell a ton of time and careful thought went into the game design and the cartoon artwork and the humor. It never gets old because you're always discovering new jokes and political commentary in the game. We were talking to the creators of the game, and they said one of the goals was that players might even learn something new as they play. I think it would make a perfect gift for anyone, really of any political orientation, because of how clever it is. And when you go to davidpakman.com/impeach, you'll get 10% off the game, but you can also get 10% off any of the hilarious clothing and accessories in the online store, including t-shirts, coffee mugs, tote bags, all featuring funny original political cartoons about the president. Get a super fun and witty gift for yourself or someone you know, whether it's Impeach the Card Slap Game or any of the other awesome stuff in the gift shop, and get 10% off of all of it when you go to davidpakman.com/impeach.